A few weeks ago, we drowned my massive 40 square foot Osgiliath board in liters and liters of resin, and we had to wait 24 hours before we knew if the largest Wargaming Scenery resin pour I've ever seen was a raging success or a colossal failure of leaking resin flooding my garage. I'll give you guys a hint, it certainly wasn't the first one, so it's finally time to reveal the mega river pour. Well, almost. First, I'm going to edge you guys just a little bit harder, because last week we built a whole new section of the Osgiliath layout, and it is more flooded than any city block so far, and it's going to take about as much resin as the first two boards combined. And this third and final flooded city gaming board threw a few challenges my way I didn't quite expect. But first, a word from today's sponsor. Mech Arena is the perfect game for people who love shooters but don't have time like they used to. I can play 2 or 3 matches in less than 10 minutes and still get in a really fun game. The maps are tight and designed for short, intense gameplay with lots of encounters and respawns. It's a whole lot of game really fast. It feels like a classic online shooter I used to play as a teen, with tight maps for fast action, but instead of hours of grinding, I can get in a quick gaming session when videos are rendering or a coat of paint's drying. It's still got plenty of strategy. It's not a simple reflex FPS, but it doesn't feel slow and clunky like most mech games. And better yet, Neymar Jr. is one of the most powerful pilots in the game, massively boosting your missile and assault weapons damage, and he's the only pilot with a special perk, letting your mech sprint more often and for longer. Neymar Jr. is definitely the strongest pilot in the game right now, and you guys can get him for free. Just play Mech Arena on 7 different days between now and December 18th, and he is yours. Mech Arena is completely free to play on Android and iOS right now, and you can use my personal link or scan the QR code on the screen to get a free starter pack worth $15, an amateur crate, 300 A coins, and a pulse cannon 4 to help kickstart your game. And if you're quick, you can add me to friends and we can play some matches together, so don't wait around. I actually did this pour at the same time as the other two. I just had it hidden behind a curtain like the sneaky bastard that I am, because the Games Workshop plastic kits weren't actually allowed to be shown yet. So first I'm going to blast through the resin pour on this board, and then we can reveal all 100 pounds of resin together in one terrifying orgy of flooded epoxy. Just like the first two pours, I threw down our gate system of a billion layers and redundancies, starting with a layer of masking tape, construction adhesive along the tape joint, a sheet of foam core, and then 3 layers of hot glue. Then on the inside, I began our resin layer with a seam of 5-minute epoxy to seal up the outward join. Surely we are safe from leaks. Like, surely. Like, come on. I even seamed up the edges against the board elements. We've got to be good, right? After raising the height of the tape layer with a second strip of tape, I checked our board was level, and then we were ready to start smashing in the resin. Just like last time, we're using a massive 100 pounds of Megapore epoxy resin that was sent to me by Barnes here in Australia. A big shout out to the folks at Barnes. The links for the resin is down below, and I jumped into doing another edge test with a small quantity of resin, and with no leaks showing yet, I added a bit more to complete the very first super thin layer that covered the whole board, and let that partially cure for about 12 hours. Still, with no signs of leaks under that low pressure of the first layer, it was time to just pour in the rest and hope for the best. Now, as I showed you guys in the last video, I mixed some different concentrations of blues and greys into the resin to try and help create a murkiness to the water, as well as help accentuate the paint work I'd done underneath to sell that effect of deepening water getting deeper as we moved into the river. But here on this board, we have our first real section of flooded shallows. I played with a few different styles, but quickly realized that in the shallow regions where you can see all the submerged tiling and rubble beneath the water, we want very little blue mixed in, but completely clear doesn't read well either. So I opted for some plain grey with the odd bit of blue, as well as blending the layers together and allowing some of the blue from the darker pours to naturally bleed into the shadows. With that shallow layer down, I kept adding on just more and more resin to the deepest part of the pour, which naturally displaced the mid regions into the shallows, creating a really nice uneven blend between the blue and the plain grey layers that added some great interest to the sunken level of the city. The one thing that I did not realize was just how sunken I'd actually made this lower level. If you guys will recall from the build video linked up above, if you haven't seen it, the whole point of this section was to capture the sunken streets aesthetic, and I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to sell that effect. But Barnes have sent me so much resin, over 100 pounds of the stuff, that I've ended up with this city sector way more sunken than I anticipated. But it looks amazing, so who cares? I gave it all a quick blast blast with my heat gun to pop any surface bubbles, and then it was time to pray to Iluvata and basically check on the damn thing once every 15 minutes for the next 24 hours. 24 hours has passed since the big pour, and everything is looking pretty good. We've got some nice bodies of water. It's actually kind of cured with a little micro texture. Obviously, we're still going to be building up a wave layer on the surface of this, but it's a promising start. We did, of course, have that one leak. We were fighting a bit of a losing battle. We did eventually stop or at least slow the rate of leaking, but we did lose probably 4 or 5 mil. This is definitely shallower than when I poured it. You can see it would have been all the way up to there, and now that rock is exposed. So we have lost some resin. We've still got the wave surface layer to bring that back up a little if we need, and it still looks fine, but I am worried that this board is now resined to the table. So let's rip off all of our gates. Let's get these off. Let's have a look at how the side looks, and then we can see just how nice these boards look together. So at first this was a total bitch. Peeling off the core board, it just totally disintegrated, and my fingers were soon throbbing as I was prying and peeling tiny bits off at a time. I tried my knife and cutting it out, but I wasn't really getting it off cleanly, and then I paused the camera to try and work out a better technique before continuing, and well, this happened. So I'm pretty sure the camera was not rolling when that just happened. But that was certainly a good test of how strong the resin is. The board has not shattered. Now I just have to work out how to get my leg out from under the table. I'm gonna try and go this way. Alright, the first priority is saving the board, obviously. Oh, it's the resin tub. That's what stops the board from collapsing. Let's get these tubs out. I guess I'll finish this one on the ground. Larissa has just made a very good point. What if that had happened like 5 hours ago while the resin was liquid? Oh my god. Okay. Let's finish cleaning the gates. So I made pretty light of that situation, but now looking back at the footage, this is kind of utterly terrifying. Basically, I was trying a new method with my hammer and chisel to knock back the gate, but the vibrations of tapping the chisel unbalanced the very dodgy 35-year-old table tennis table legs, and one side collapsed onto my right leg. But luckily, the resin tubs underneath caught the bulk of the load, and my leg was simply pinned in place. The absolute true wonder, though, is that this table didn't collapse of its own accord while the resin was still wet. If this had come down during the night while I was asleep, I could have woken up to 30 pounds of resin cured to the floor of my mother-in-law's garage. Bullet dodged there for sure. On the plus side, the chisel method was not only a lot faster, but if you get the angle right, you can basically take off all of the layers of the gate in one smooth piece. The first gate is off, and I discovered a whole new problem. The branding on the masking tape has actually transferred to the surface of the resin, leaving blue and yellow pigment on the river's edge, but oddly enough, this wasn't actually that hard to fix. I just grabbed a really sharp blade and cut through it. The epoxy doesn't fully cure for 72 hours, which is also probably why the board didn't shatter when the table collapsed. So it's still got a little bit of give, and it's not super brittle. So I could literally saw back and forth, slicing through the resin.
This is a swimming pool, and my hands are people, and this is a change room. Oh, we want to go for a swim. It's an ice station. It's not a swimming pool, it's an ice station.
The weight of the resin had like bowed the gates anyway, so it's gone over the lip of that table edge, so I needed to do that anyway to kind of get the edges to line up where they should be, and this also helped me get rid of the meniscus from the surface tension of the drying resin. Any dodgy cuts are just going to get hidden by the wave layer down the track. Then it's time for board number 2. Oh, it's definitely stuck to the table. Oh wow, it's not that much. The hot glue had actually done the job and slowed down the leak enough so that not that much resin had actually flowed underneath the board at all. I was really surprised. I chiseled off the leak defenses, and then I set about cleaning up the gates, which came off much faster with the new method. The second board needed a fair bit of cleanup with the knife, but it all cut down reasonably well, although this part seriously burns the hands and forearms. It's such a workout. The third board was much the same, although a little bit trickier again because I had a lot of that tape kind of peeling inwards on this one, but I soon had all 3 resin pours degated and relatively cleaned up. Before we can throw all the boards together to see the flooded city in all its glory, we actually still have a whole city subsector to complete. Now this was Wednesday afternoon, 2 days before we were set to film our Osgiliath Battle Report campaign, which will be either out already by now or about to come out when this video drops. I'll leave a link in the description and the pinned comment for you guys so you can watch that when they are live. But I needed to rapidly finish the last 2x4 foot panel at the back of the new Games Workshop plastic Osgiliath mega build. First, we need to smash out some foundations for the central 2-tower structure of the massive L-shaped building. I cut down some extruded polystyrene to about 5mm thick and slashed it down to the floor plan, tacking pieces together with tape before going into full stonework mode for a nice easy texture all over. I then glued down the lower level of the structure, ensuring that the upper levels would sit and that it was all nice and square. Then to finish construction of the 3 towers, we need to put in our stairs. Last week we carved some stairs from foam and then made molds with silicon and cast a whole bunch more in polyurethane resin. I glued these mostly in with construction adhesive, chocking them in place from below and ensuring they'd lined up in the right spot with the floor above, but occasionally I dropped in a little drop here and there of 5-minute epoxy resin to help really keep them strong until that adhesive sort of fully cures over about 24 hours. I hacked away a few of the stairs as well with some clippers to create some really fun damaged stairwell patterns, especially where the walls or the floors nearby had collapsed, and I was really happy with the finished look once they were all in. I just can't wait to see them covered with rubble. If you're enjoying the build so far, let me know down in the comments your favorite Middle-earth location from the Lord of the Rings that you'd love me to go and visit in New Zealand, and then like the video and subscribe to go in the draw to win an amazing pack of Osgiliath goodies. You can also double your chances if you join our Patreon down in the description or become a YouTube channel member. Now, a quick note on these giveaways. YouTube comment sections across the platform, including mine, have been under attack by a bunch of scam bots impersonating YouTubers claiming to give away PS5s and other nonsense stuff. If you ever win a giveaway, the only way I will contact you is by announcing your name in the video and then confirming via email. I will never ask you to send money for postage, that's included in the prize, and I will never ask you to contact me on Telegram, whatever the hell that is. If you have not heard me say your name in the video and show your comment on the screen, you are being scammed. I block and delete the accounts as fast as I can, but sometimes they still get through. They always pop up when I'm asleep at night, which is really sneaky. On a lighter note, the full release for the Osgiliath box goes live this weekend, so remember to use my affiliate links down below whenever you're purchasing any hobby goodies, from Middle-earth to the Horus Heresy and everything in between. We've got affiliates in the US, EU, Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and any purchase made through those links gets you fantastic prices and sends some dollary-doos back to support the channel. In fact, if you are picking up the new Osgiliath box set from Gap Games here in Brisbane, Australia, you can use this code on screen now to get 25% off the Games Workshop retail price. The links are all down in the description. Then I decided that I needed at least one more building for the city to give it enough life to kind of film the battle reports, and after falling so in love with the L-shaped form, I decided to repeat it, but on a smaller scale, but still just as tall. So I started smashing plastic together. For a different architectural vibe, I used a lot of the pieces that had the murder hole style windows, especially on the lower level, and then started building upwards, ensuring that my floor plans left room for yet more stairwells. We want as many ways up and down from these buildings as possible to enhance playability. In fact, this building gets a massive run in the first battle report. It's really cool. Just like our earlier buildings, I used all my tricks and techniques to make blasted out holes, gangways, collapse walls, and build the structure in modular segments that were fully removable for gameplay, storage, and filming purposes. With the main structure knocked up, I laid it out on the board and got my spacing for the primary upper gangway that would join this little L to the big L, and then ripped a hole in the side of the big L tower so that we had somewhere to join this unforeseen gangway, and knocked the piece together using the same locking methods as earlier ones in last week's video. But before I could join these pieces together, I realized there was a huge height discrepancy in the buildings. Those of you who've watched the build so far will remember that when I built these original towers, I used trim pieces, these little detail-y bits, in between every single wall layer, and thus I ran out of those pieces. And so when I'm building the 2 tile high walls for this building, they're actually quite shorter, and across 6 tiles, that really adds up to a significant drop in height over the course of the building. So I decided to make up a really fancy plinth foundation that started higher and then terraced back down to the ground. I started with the thickest sheet of extruded poly and carved in our standard brickwork pattern, and then built a really fun set of stairwells and a little courtyard terrace in the inside corner of the L shape to step down to the board, and I just love how much this has added to the building. I also added the 2 missing stairwells wrapping around the L for quick access access to the upper level, and also found a solution to all the missing trim pieces that I couldn't hide on the flooring levels, which basically just had this huge seam of exposed unfinished plastic. A nice little strip of polystyrene carved with a brickwork pattern worked an absolute treat. Quick, easy, and a nice point of visual difference from all the other buildings so far. Oddly, this little guy might be one of my favorite buildings. Sometimes simple is best. I knocked up another little stairwell standalone section to create yet another gangway, enabling this building to join down to the lower city as well, and then it was time to get all of these buggers painted. Before the prime goes down, I just want to shout out my amazing Patreons. These incredible people are a huge part of why any of this madness can happen. To become a part of the family and get your name on the screen and support the channel, as well as going in the draw to score some sweet giveaways, check out my Patreon linked in the description, or you can simply hit join here on YouTube. It's all part of the same YouTube family member, Patreon family big thing. It's right down there next to subscribe. Go and smash it. Thanks, guys. Super simple painting process for these, which we covered in the video last week. We just prime dark grey, zenithal light grey, and then an all-over dry brush and a big black acrylic wash. Then I slapped together a really simple temporary floor for this part of the city by just painting the green structural foam with dappled grey house paint, and then assembled the city in place. I am loving the layout. And by this point, it was 2 AM on Saturday morning, with our bat reps due to be filmed in just 6 hours, but I still needed a few finishing touches. It's funny, I really didn't notice just how much the oil weathering layer does for the whole board until you see the before and after right next to each other. So I squashed my desperate need for sleep deep down and threw down the brown and black oil washes. Absolutely worth it. The final step on the very morning of the battle report, just before the guys arrived, was to throw base ready rubble just everywhere, all over the board. I didn't even have time to glue it down. That'll all have to be done later on, but even scattered loosely, it just adds so much, and it absolutely saves that sort of painted foam foundation. Everything looks so much better now. Then it was time to throw down some models and begin the great battle of our time. Stay tuned for the amazing battle reports we filmed on this just monster of a board. They were a blast to play, and I'm thrilled to say that for now, this board is finished. Except for the wave layer, the whole back street, and the last 20% of the plastic Games Workshop sent me. Okay, it's not finished.